Hi again. In Samuel Andrews' introduction to Christianity and anti-Christianity and their final conflict, we're in the middle of the introduction. He's already dealt with the beliefs of the early church about Antichrist. Now he's dealing with modifications as the centuries went by. It need only be said here that as the expectation of a speedy return of the Lord gradually passed away, and it was believed that the prophecies respecting the success and glory of the church were to be fulfilled during his absence, and that this might be indefinitely prolonged, the fear of Antichrist's speedy appearance ceased, and comparatively little interest was taken in it, and the matter became practically of little importance. It does not really affect the unanimity of the pre-Reformation church that in the 12th and following centuries some small sects began to apply the prophecies respecting Babylon to the Church of Rome and identify the papacy with the Antichrist. Since this seems to have been done rather out of anger because of real and suppressed or supposed oppression than upon any clear view of the character of Antichrist or upon any consistent principle of prophetic interpretation. At this time, too, or a little later, when the Roman Church was much distracted with the contentions of rival popes, it was not unusual for zealous partisans to brand the claimants they opposed with the title of Antichrist. Thus, St. Bernard of the 12th century called Pope Leo, whom he regarded as a usurper of St. Peter's chair, the beast of the apocalypse. But it will be noted that it was the usurper, not the real pope, whom he so called. It was not the Bishop of Rome, the true vicar of Christ as such, to whom the title of Antichrist in these disputes was applied, but to one who falsely claimed to be his vicar. And it was not until the Reformation that it was applied to the popes officially, without distinction, a series of antichrists. Some changes during this period of the primitive belief will be spoken of later. Second, the period from the Reformation to the French Revolution. The application of the term Antichrist to the Pope in his official position, or its application to the papacy as a system, marks the Reformation period. It is said by the Roman Catholic commentator Estius, in his remarks on 2 Thessalonians 2, that, quote, Luther, instigated by the devil, was the first to apply the term to the Pope as Pope, end of quote. But it is not clear that at first Luther meant it to apply to the whole series of popes. This was done later by many of the leading reformers and marks a growing estrangement from the papacy. It shows also a wide departure from the early belief in affirming A, that the Antichrist was not an individual, and B, that he had already appeared, and C, that the apostasy would not be a total denial of the truth. The designation of the papal system as anti-Christian and its head an Antichrist is found in several of the confessions of the Reformed churches. Also, the address of the translators of the Bible to King James. In the Westminster Confession, we read, quote, The Pope is that Antichrist, that man of sin and son of perdition, that setteth himself in the church against God and all that is called God. The same is said in the Savoy Declaration of 1658, with this addition, quote, We expect that in the latter day, Antichrist being destroyed, the Jews called, and the adversaries of the kingdom of God's Son broken, the Church of Christ, enlarged and edified through a free communication of life and peace, will enjoy in this world a more quiet, peaceable, and glorious condition than it has enjoyed. End of quote. The belief of the Protestant churches as to the papal Antichrist continued to be generally held, though with some modifications, down to the time of the French Revolution. It was, however, held less and less firmly, and by some was openly rejected. The glaring inconsistency of calling those anti-Christians who offered all their worship in the name of Christ was more and more felt. But now he deals with the third period from the French Revolution to the present time. After this revolution, the belief of the Reformers as to the papal Antichrist was much modified, and by many Protestants is now entirely given up. Several causes for this may be given: the natural decay of the old animosity and bitterness of feeling toward the Roman Church, and the growing consciousness that a church which holds and respects or repeats in its services the three great creeds and claims its head to be the vicar of Christ cannot in any real sense of the term be called anti-Christian. Still more important in effecting this change was the French Revolution, which brought into view a new and most deadly element of hostility to the Christian faith, not its corruption merely, but its total denial, and therefore affecting alike all Christian communions. Not a few Protestants now accept the primitive belief that the Antichrist is a single man and that he is yet to come. Others distinguish between the Roman Church and the Papacy, the last being the Antichrist. Others still find two Antichrists, the papal and the infidel, the first fulfilling one part of the Scriptures and preparing the way for the last, who will completely fulfill them. Charles Hodge, for instance, in his systematic theology says, quote, "There may hereafter be a great anti-Christian power concentrated in an anti-Christian ruler who will be utterly destroyed at the coming of the Lord. And at the same time, the belief may be maintained that the Antichrist, designated by Daniel and St. Paul, is not a man, but an institution or organized power, such as a kingdom or the papacy." End of Hodge quote. There are probably many Protestants in our day who have no definite belief, and while they may regard Roman doctrine in important points as corrupt, do not look upon the papacy itself as anti-Christian. And there is doubtless a very considerable and increasing number in all Christian communions who wholly disbelieve in any Antichrist to come, and who think the matter to be of no practical importance, not worthy of consideration. Some because they believe in a victorious future of the Church, and others because they expect on evolutionary grounds a gradual but continuous development of humanity, and reject all supernatural interpositions. In the Roman Church, there seems to be no authoritative teaching, and various beliefs are expressed. The belief of Malvenda, in his Latin De Antichristo, that the Antichrist will be an individual and is still future, is probably the more general belief. And here he also references the famous Cardinal Bellarmine of the period of the Reformation on this, the general belief of the Catholic Church that it's an individual. But then he has John Henry Newman and F.A. Hewitt to represent modern Catholic points of view. He says, here we add some remarks of John Henry Newman as to the value of this enquiry. Quote, "In the present state of things, when the great object of education is supposed to be the getting rid of things supernatural, I must think that this vision of Antichrist as a supernatural power to come is a great providential gain, as being a counterpoise to the evil tendencies of the age. It must surely be profitable for our thoughts to be sent backward and forward to the beginning and the end of the gospel times, to the first and second coming of Christ." Now, F.A. Hewitt, a Paulist father, by the way, in the Catholic Quarterly in 1894, gives a different opinion. He tries to show that the predictions respecting Antichrist were fulfilled in Muhammad, and that the kingdom of Christ is advancing on a steady line of progress towards a development which shall surpass anything in its past history. So Hewitt is exemplifying the optimism of the Victorian period in general, and the optimism of amillennialism and postmillennialism as systems, that somehow things will get better by the gradual influence or infiltration of Christianity into the spirit of the world. I'll put in a link to basic books on Bible prophecy. I think there's 5 or 6 recommendations in here, which should be in everybody's library if they're serious about not just this subject, but prophecy in general. Of course, 1/4 of the Bible is prophecy, so it's hard to ignore that without consequently getting a unbalanced view of Revelation in general. And I mean, of course, small r Revelation here, as well as the book of Revelation. If we want to know the correct interpretation of that book of New Testament prophecy, we just have to know a lot more about the Old. So these books will help you. Basic books on Bible prophecy. See you next time.